everybody. I hope you're having a good day. It's Thursday, April the 9th. I have to remind myself every day what day of the week it is, what day of the month it is. It's so difficult not having a routine, but it has been a beautiful Thursday. Our yellow pine pollen is just about over. For some of you, this is your first experience with the yellow pollen in Georgia in the spring, and it's miserable. It looks horrible and makes us feel horrible. I'm happy to tell you that it's just about over with, and we're happy about that. I hope the videos are going okay for you. Please do communicate if you have any issues. Sorry for confusing emails and texts. Everybody's trying to figure this process out, and I do think that we are pretty much settled on this, and I think maybe it's going to start working really well now. We're going to start today with a couple more tricky word pairs. The first one is, I think, very familiar for you. I just want to just revisit it for you because it's real important, particularly with pronunciation, so that your listener will know which accept or except you want to use. Accept begins with that short vowel ah sound. So if you emphasize that, it will launch you into that version correctly. Accept. That is when we have a willingness to participate or go along with something. Go along is one of our phrasal verbs, means to join in. A willingness to participate or go along with something. Certainly it's a word that you're quite familiar with. Elias will accept the invitation to meet his girlfriend's parents. We accept invitations quite often. And sometimes they're spoken invitations, sometimes they're written, but we accept, or we might have a reason not to accept an invitation. Some invitations are not, or some opportunities are a little bit difficult for us to accept sometimes. It was difficult, but I accepted my husband's decision to move the family to Seattle. Certainly some of you have been in this case. You have had to relocate somewhere. Maybe it was your choice and maybe it was not so much your choice. So sometimes we accept something even though it's not our choice, even though it's not an easy thing to accept. Accept begins with an E, that short E sound, eh. So if we launch the word with that eh sound, it will help us to be clear that we're using the word accept instead of ah. So try really hard to distinguish that vowel. Accept is most commonly used as a preposition, meaning not including or other than. Everyone except Valentina will play in the tennis tournament on Saturday. So we could insert, instead of the word except, we could say everyone not including Valentina, or everyone other than Valentina will participate in the tennis tournament on Saturday. And that's probably the most common way that we use except. But sometimes we use it as a conjunction. And when we do use it as a conjunction, it has to do with if not for the fact. If not for the fact. Okay? That's a little trickier. Here's a sentence that might make it more clear. Juan would have met us at the lake, except that his boss kept him overtime. Oftentimes when except is used in this way, if not for the fact, it will be followed by the word that. Okay, very commonly, but not always, we followed by the word that. So Juan would have met us at the lake, except if not for the fact that his boss kept him overtime. So, a tricky word pair mainly because of the pronunciation. So I wanted to revisit it for that reason. All right, the next one that we will do is lightening and lightening. Only one letter difference, but quite a big difference in meaning. So let's take a look at this one. Excuse me as I reach for things. We'll start with the bottom one this time. This form of lightning is a noun or an adjective. And we certainly know that dramatic flash of light often occurs with a storm, correct? Lightning. The players rushed off the field when they saw a streak of lightning and heard the thunder. I think lightning is beautiful, but it does scare me just a little bit. Sometimes, though, lightning can be used as an adjective. And when it is, it's usually referring to speed, okay? When it's an adjective. Hei Ping is a lightning fast track star at her high school. Lightning fast. When we see that streak of lightning in the sky, it's super fast, right? If someone is lightning fast as a runner, we can imagine that they might just simply streak past us because of their speed. Sometimes I have said to students, goodness, you completed this page in lightning fast time. Maybe you need to go back and check your work. So sometimes to be lightning fast is means that maybe someone has rushed and they got careless. But we often use it to refer to runners or very fast cars, that sort of thing. This lightning is typically a verb, okay? And it means to make something lighter. In color, weight, or even feeling. All right, so I'll give you a couple examples of lightening. So we've got to make sure that we get this syllable in there, lightening. I lightened my suitcase so that I would be able to take it on the plane. How many times have you done that? I've done it quite a few. Sometimes we even take things out of the suitcase right at check-in because they say it's too heavy. So we lighten the weight of the suitcase so that we can check it onto the plane. Sometimes we have our feelings lightened. After talking several times with my counselor, Lynn, my worries began to lighten. My worries became less. My load, the heavy load on my heart or on my mind, was lightened by that conversation with the counselor. So those two kinds of are two examples, and then we also lighten things in color. If you have paint and you put it on the wall and you say, I wanted blue, but that's a little too dark, you might take that paint back to the store and ask the clerk at the paint store to lighten it for you, to add some white and lighten it. So we lighten colors. We use blinds on our window and open them to lighten the room. So just the tricky part here is mostly with spelling, mostly pronouncing this second syllable, and that will help you to communicate which type of lightning and lightning you want to communicate with your with the person who's your listener. All right, and I think those are the two that I wanted to do today. So we will move on to something else. If there's a tricky word pair that you would like for us to take a look at, please be sure to let me know, and we'll take a look. Some of them, I think, simpler than others for us. All right, if you've had a chance to read the article about penicillin and work through those activities, then great. If not, the next few comments may not make quite as much sense to you, but I hope that the article was interesting for you, that perhaps even if you knew that information, it refreshed your memory. It certainly did for me. I think I probably, learned that back in school a few times, but I haven't thought about it in years, and it was kind of an interesting time to think about a discovery of such importance. Just want to mention a couple of kind of closing thoughts to that I've had, and I hope that you had some time to reflect on it as well. One of the things that article brought to mind is that the human race is has always been, continues to be a curious race of people. We are a determined race of people. We persevere. Persevere means to stick with something. Now, certainly not all of us, and certainly not all the time, but there are so many people who, in little ways and in big ways, touch our lives every day and do things for us, make our lives better because of their curiosity, their determination, and their perseverance. I can think of so many things that I'm grateful for that people who have gone before me have done. So that's always been a part of our history, and this particular story I really appreciate because I know that these individuals who worked to bring penicillin into the world as a medication that is so very valuable, I know that they did that without the advantage of the technology that we have today, and that makes me appreciate them and this discovery so much more. I also have to say that I found it very notable, notable meaning worth noting, that a woman was involved in this process, and that she determined the chemical structure so that penicillin could be created artificially in the lab, and therefore produced in even greater quantities. So I think it's interesting at that point in time in history that a woman was involved in this process, And that was a time that women were less likely to be in areas of science and research. So I thought that that was really an important feature of the article. And then I know that there was a discussion question. In your case, our case, it was a question to think about approval on new drugs. And this is different in different countries. I think that there are countries where the process of approval for medications is maybe less detailed than it should be. I think in the United States, sometimes it's a little more of a process than is needed, maybe, or at least too long of a process when certain treatments are really, really needed by human beings in the moment. So our Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration here in the United States, has very strict guidelines about the approval of new medications, as well as medications that are have already been on the market, but a newer version of those medications perhaps is being developed. Either way, whether it's brand new or a new version, the FDA has very, very strict guidelines. Now, the companies that actually create and want to put their brand on a medication are the ones who do the clinical trials. And these trials can last a year and a half, 2 years, depending on the data that is received through those trials. Sometimes a trial is shorter because the data will be overwhelming, maybe overwhelming on the good side or overwhelming on the negative side. Oh, this drug is working for, almost everyone who is trying it in the trial. Or this drug is really causing problems for the people in the trial. So either way, sometimes the process could end a little earlier with the trials, depending on the data that is collected. Once the drug company has finished their trials, then they submit all of that data to the Food and Drug Administration. And from there, it can take another 6 months to a year for the Food and Drug Administration to review all of that information and to decide if this is a drug that they are willing to put their stamp of approval. We call that stamp of approval, means saying that they are going to stand behind it. And the FDA decides if they're going to put their stamp of approval on this drug. Certainly, drug companies are working fast and furious every day on creating new medications because this is how they make their money. And creating those drugs and marketing those drugs becomes a very expensive process for the drug company, and then they pass that expense along to us. And we pay a high dollar amount for drugs that are newer and that are only manufactured by one company. After a certain number of years, I believe it's 5 or 6 years, copycat companies can then make their version of that drug. And when that happens, the drug becomes generic. Generic, G-E-N-E-R-I-C, is a word that means common, commonly available in this case. So certain medications that at one time, such as maybe a blood thinner, the blood thinner Plavix, which has been used all around the world. And at one time it was only made by one company, and they labeled it as Plavix, and they made all the money, and they were able to charge very high dollar amount for that drug. After so many years, 5 or 6 years, then the government allows for copycat companies to produce their version of that drug, and when they do, the price goes way down. Right now, obviously, there are so many drugs being considered as treatment for coronavirus and the various effects of coronavirus. Some of the drugs that we already have are very seriously being looked at to see if they can be effective on coronavirus, but we will probably in time see new treatments. Hopefully we'll see new treatments. And the same is true, I know we said this the other day, but the same is true for vaccines.